Um, I saw a survey this week. It's funny, you get your mind on certain things and you'll see different things promoted online or in print there. And I saw a survey commissioned this week by Dave & Buster's, had did a survey of Americans. Talker Research did it, and they found that 48% of Americans aren't having fun. And it struck me when I saw it. And I don't know if that's true in Bedford or if it's true at Mount Pleasant, but let's just, 50% almost, 48%, 1 out of every 2 not having fun. 12% of Americans can't recall the last time they had fun. It's so far in the rearview mirror they can't remember when that was. When they talk about the reasons why they're having such a tough time, some people cited the high cost, it's expensive to have fun, or their busy schedules, or work obligations, so much to do, and you can't get free time to do it. Some people are burned out. Digital, Lance kind of alluded to that. Sometimes our digital stuff gets in the way, and we're so busy on our phones or tablets that we don't have time to focus on relationships, and those things can engage the mind, but not really engage your spirit with other people. Could be a lot of reasons. But for whatever reason, 48% not having fun and 12% can't remember the last time they had fun. And I should mention a couple things about this, first of all, before we get into too deep into this thing. I think it's interesting, and I want to talk about it. But first, as a proviso, I guess, for everything else, this really is a first world problem. I don't think the people in Senegal are having surveys about whether they're having enough fun. And it is a sign of a culture that has too much money and probably too much time on their hands when that sort of thing is a problem. I should make as a proviso that Dave & Buster's, like I said, commissioned this. And if there's a problem that only Dave & Buster's can solve, maybe it's not that big a problem. So I want to mention that again, too. But with both those things in mind, I think it's interesting. I think the whole thing is interesting, that a lot of people just feel like life is hard, and it's not that they're suffering, really, not a health crisis or a money crisis or anything like that. It's just they're living their lives, they've got jobs, they've got families, and it just seems like there's no point to any of it. I think that's interesting. And I'm sure, depending on how you phrase the question, you get different answers, but that is interesting to me. And again, I don't know that it applies to us, but the idea that 1 out of every 2 of you might be thinking about something like that, that's interesting, for whatever reason. Now, I had somebody ask me after first service, so what do you define as fun? And I think if you're asking that question, you probably haven't had any fun. So probably you're probably one of the 48%. But to me, it's just joy, right? I mean, it's the idea that life has a point, that there's a purpose to all this, that I'm heading the right direction. I feel good, I may not like everything that's going on, but I can smile about this moment. Everything about this feels right, feels good, feels happy. I think that's interesting. And again, because of what I was getting ready to preach about this week, it was one of those things that kind of struck me fast. Now, we've been, for the last 3 weeks, and we'll be there for another 5 weeks, today and 4 more, we're going to talk about Romans chapter 8. A lot of stuff in Romans 8 that is worth getting into. And Paul goes into a section like this where he talks about the weight of this world, the weight of the present moment. And I don't think he was thinking about having fun, certainly not in the Dave & Buster's sense of the word, but I do think that central tension, I think they felt it then, and I think that we've not really evolved that much. I think there's something in us that feels like life ought to be going a certain way. And when we're out of tune with that, it can be quite disconcerting. And I wanted to kind of think about that today as we get into the sermon, and I'll come back to it as we get a little deeper into this thing. Last week, the very last verse we looked at was Romans chapter 8:17, and it said, we're heirs of God's glory, but if we're going to share in his glory, then we have to share his suffering. And it's talking about Jesus there. If we're going to share the glory of Jesus, we're co-heirs with Christ. If we're going to share his glory, then we should expect occasionally to get smacked. The suffering he's talking about here is not the suffering that everybody goes through. It's not talking about bad health, or the occasional downturn in the economy. It doesn't matter if you're a Christian or not. Those things affect everybody, no matter where you're at with the Lord. And he's not talking about that. I mean, that's a nice point. He's also not talking about the kind of suffering that you get because you did something foolish. If you get a $200 speeding ticket, it's not God's fault, right? I mean, so sometimes we do foolish things, and because we do foolish things, we reap the results of that. And that's not what he's talking about here either. What he's talking about is the person who makes a conscious decision to live for Christ in this world, and the pushback that the world's going to give to such a decision. Jesus is our example. He had a different vision for how the world should be, and he pushed that different vision, and it so irritated the people in charge they got rid of him. Now we're 2,000 years from that, and I should mention that a lot of Jesus' ideas, a lot of Jesus' teaching, if you're here today and you're not a Christian, if I could just say something that's kind of an argument for Christ here, just the very beginning. So much of the air we breathe in this country and the way we think, all of us, it's Christ influenced. And so much, as a historian, Tom Holland, and he's not a Christian, but he wrote a book called Dominion a few years ago, and he talked about, it's amazing how many of the things in our culture we take for granted, and it's only there because of Jesus and Jesus' teaching and Jesus' followers. Things like equality. I think if somebody were to say out loud, I don't think some people are equal to others, that person would be booed. If a politician were to say, I think that certain races are better than other races, or I think that certain certain income people are better than others, or whatever. I only like rich people. If somebody were to get up and say that sort of thing, they'd be booed out of the room. It is universally accepted, that all people are equal. But that's only a Jesus idea. It all comes from him. That's not how Caesar thought. That's not how Genghis Khan thought. It's not how any of the empires thought. I mean, really, until after the Middle Ages, finally enough of Christ's teaching permeating into everything to bring everybody along. There was no other philosopher talking that way when Jesus started. And his teachings have kind of carried the day. It was Jesus that talked about how you should have control of your body, and that would not be something that Aristotle would have thought. Aristotle thought that the strong should take advantage of the weak. That's not what Socrates believed. It was only Jesus who taught that your body is a temple and that you're chosen by God, a son or daughter of him, and that you have certain rights and privileges just because of that. And his teachings have carried the day. Even people who would say they're not Christian at all will look to Christ and his teaching as the foundation, whether they know it or not. Holland, in the book, says it's like a goldfish swimming in Christian waters, and they don't even realize they're doing it. You think about a lot of the major arguments in the world. A person might argue about abortion, and one person would say, we can't do that to that innocent child. And another person would say, we can't tell a woman what to do with her own body. And both of those people, in both of those arguments, are appealing to arguments and ideas that Jesus advanced first, even though they don't know it. Okay. So, if we want to be a people who follow hard after Jesus and his teachings, and we're going to do that in this world that is so often premeditated to go the other direction, we should expect some pushback. In our world, in creation, pretty much whatever you quit applying energy to, it starts to fall apart. Whether that's your yard or your marriage. As soon as you quit applying energy to it, it starts to rust or rot or crumble or break. It requires energy to make that happen. And when Christ's followers, when Christians make a decision that we want to live for Christ and we apply energy that direction, we should expect an equal and opposite reaction from people who might not want to go that direction. That's what Paul's saying here. And because we know that we're going to get the glory, we must also expect occasionally to get some pushback. However, and this is new here. We're going to start a new idea here. However, he says, I consider that our present sufferings are not worth comparing with the glory that will be revealed in us. Now, when Paul says this, the obvious counter-argument is, well, you're minimizing pain. You're just saying that I should just put on a happy face. That's not what Paul's saying. And Paul knew something about pain, for sure. I mean, Paul, he writes about it quite frequently, all the different things he's going through. Paul says it just is too small a price for you not to pay it. I mean, even the hard things we go through. And Christ died. Paul died in pursuit of what he believed. That probably won't be asked of any Christian in here, but not in America, not in 2026. However, even if it was that, Paul says, it would be worth paying because Christ's way is the best way. And Christ's death and resurrection proves to us that we've got a hope that's bigger than this world. And a hope that's bigger than just what we can see and hold on to. And Paul, who understood what pain was about, says, I think these present sufferings are going to pale in comparison to what Jesus is going to do and how Jesus is going to move. And I think, again, about that statistic, that half of Americans aren't having fun. They don't see the point of any of this. And I wonder if that's because so many Christians, so many Americans, and maybe some Christians too, so many Americans maybe trying to see the world from the wrong perspective. And Paul's perspective here, if they understood the glory that was offered to us, they might go a different direction. And then Paul starts talking about, he'll use a word groaning. He's going to use it 3 different times. And this word groaning is like an agonizing. It's like it's a weight on your shoulders, your back hurts, your legs hurt, you're suffering underneath of it. It's a heavy word. And he says creation, it waits in eager expectation for the children of God to be revealed. The world that we're in, the rocks and the trees and the air that we breathe, it's waiting. He paints creation like it's a living thing, like Mother Nature, but it's like a living thing. And the world that we're in is hungry to see God make a difference, God to change it for real, to change it permanently. We know about the promise in Christ. We're ready to see it be fulfilled. He tells us this verse out, and I'm going to read it, but we're going to go back and read it again because it's pretty thick. Paul says, for creation was subjected to frustration, not by its own choice, but by the will of him who subjected it. In hope, he says, that creation itself would be liberated from the bondage to decay, brought into freedom and glory of the children of God. It's a big sentence. I ask some people sometimes, remember diagramming sentences back in school? How many of you love diagramming sentences? Nobody. Oh, one brave soul in the front. This would be a hard sentence to diagram. So let me go back through it real fast, make sure that we catch the bigger parts. He says, creation was subjected to frustration. Paul's alluding to the curse. Adam and Eve ate the fruit and decided they would rather be in charge of their own lives. Thank you very much. They didn't want to do it God's way. And so they ate the fruit, and they decided they would decide what's good and evil. And because of that, out of all creation, nothing tells God no except for us. If God tells the animals to do certain things and gives them instinctual patterns, they'll follow those patterns without thinking about it. They'll do what they're told. And the trees and the rocks and the very dirt that we walk on, it does what it's told. If God says move, it moves, or shake, it shakes. He can part the waters. But if God tells us not to lie, we might lie anyway. We might go a different direction. And that's the curse, right, of sin. And God curses us because of it. And he says that the land won't do right anymore. Things are going to tend towards destruction. Things are going to tend towards falling apart. And again, that same principle. As soon as I quit applying energy to it, it's going to start to rust or rot or break. So creation was subjected to frustration, not by its own choice, but by God. So God made the choice. Because we made our choice, God made his choice. And the world wouldn't respond like it was designed to respond. But God did all that in hopes, he says, that creation itself would one day be free. And that we would hunger for that. That we would hunger for that moment when this world would be like it really is supposed to be. And the bondage it has to decay right now, that'd be gone. The way things all want to fall apart, that would be over. And we could go into a new earth, a new world that would be right. This was always the plan of God. In fact, I think God hopes that as you walk through this world, whether it's in the nature or in a city or just in your house, that you would feel that tension. That even when things are rocking, that you wonder if, okay, God, what next? I just feel like it's, like as an example, we make a decision that we want to fix up this world, right? We want to do something in this world to make it better. We have the heart of God on this, and we want creation. And at some level, the hunger to clean or to mow or to fix up, that's not necessarily an ungodly idea. The idea that we want to make this world right. And so we'll pour our energy into making it right. Because in our heart of hearts, we know that there's something wrong with the world. We want to improve it. We want to leave our mark on it. We want to take it to where it needs to go. A couple days ago, I helped a work crew, and we built a ramp for somebody in the church who needed a ramp built. And it's just some little thing. It took us a long time, but it's not heavy construction. And we made it, and we set it all up, and it'll really bless them, I think, while they have it. And we made a little corner of the world better. And I think there's something in us that wants to do it. And because of that, work is noble. Almost any work is noble because you feel this tension, right? That it's not what it's supposed to be. But that tension that we all feel, God leaves that tension in hopes that we'll wake up to it. That we'll feel it too, that we'll see it too, that this world is not where it, and we'll fight back to God. He says, Paul does, we know that the whole creation has been groaning, like in pains of childbirth, right up to the present time. And that pains of childbirth is a favorite expression of Jesus, and Paul uses it too. And the idea that it hurts in the moment, but when it's over, you're going to be glad that you went through it. It was awful, but when you get through it, it was worth it. And Paul's making that same point about the suffering that we go through now. It's not worth comparing to the glory we're going to see on the other side. But he says not only that, not only is creation groaning, but he says we also, who have the first fruit of the Spirit, we groan as we eagerly await for this adoption to sonship, redemption of our bodies. Now, I told you last week that you've been adopted. J.I. Packer, remember, said it's the highest privilege in the gospel. It's awesome to be forgiven, but to be taken in to the family, what a gift that is. It's more than just being let off the hook for your sin. You've been invited into the house. You can eat at the table. So Paul says you've got that. But now Paul says, just a few verses later, we're waiting. So it's this tension, right? We've already been given the promise, but we don't yet have it all. We've already been given a down payment. That's the first fruits of the Spirit. But we don't have it all yet. One day, our bodies will be redeemed. You know, I won't fall apart like I do now. I'll have a new body and a new mind. One day, this world will be redeemed. And it won't fall apart the way it does now. This is the promise of heaven and a new earth, and this is the promise of God for us. And we who have the first fruit of the Spirit, we know it, we feel it in our hearts, we groan about it. It works on us, this tension between, I know it ought to be better than this, God. I know it ought to be higher and stronger and better than this. And you could read that like concessively, like it's in spite of the fact we have the Spirit, sometimes we doubt. But you could read it like that. In spite of the fact we have the Spirit, sometimes we groan. I don't think that's what he's saying. I don't think it's concessive. I think he means it causal. Because we have the Spirit, because God's touched our hearts, we feel it really acutely. This promise that God's given us and what we see. This promise, and as a Christian, this promise of what it should be like to be a parent or a husband or a wife or a citizen or a neighbor. I mean, I know what it should be. I read Christ's teachings. I know what I ought to be. I know who I should become. And yet this tension, I'm not there yet. In this world that I'm working on, we're not there yet. And the very presence of God's Spirit in my hearts makes that painful almost. Like it's a serious groaning. But Paul says it's this hope that we're saved for. This promise that one day he's going to turn it around. And the rest of this slide, he's just saying, that's how hope works. You already had it, you wouldn't hope for it. But one day God's going to make it happen. And it's this hope that makes us saved. And in the same way, and this will be the last verse I really want to focus on. In the same way, the Spirit helps us in our weakness. And we don't know what we ought to pray for, but the Spirit knows. And he intercedes for us through wordless groans. So creation groans, and we groan, and the Spirit groans inside of us. One thing about this prayer verse, too, in terms of understanding prayer, I don't know if this will make sense or not 100%, but stay with me just for a second. I think this is really important. I go to God in prayer because I need something too often. That's the reason. Something is going wrong, and I'll pray about it, and God, I need help here. I need you to do this. Take care of this person. Heal this one. Fix me, God. I'll pray about something I need help with. And I'll pray, and God in heaven will answer, and I see results a lot. He doesn't always do what I want. It's not a genie. I mean, God can say no, but I see it work, and I see God move, and I see the power of God happen that way, and that's a powerful thing. But I don't think that's the main point of prayer. It's certainly a powerful thing, but I don't think that's the main point. I think the main point is to draw us close to him. That's the main point. And so when I pray, sometimes I don't even know how to pray, and God helps me pray, which would be a weird thing if the only point of prayer is to get stuff, right? If the only point of prayer was to get stuff, then it'd be like God in heaven helping me. It'd be like, hey, you could ask for a car. It'd be that kind of thing. And I don't think that's what he's saying there. Or you could ask for more money. You could ask for this. I don't think that's the deal. The point is for me to draw close to him. Because God's Spirit groans for that too. God longs for the day when we'll be one. When we'll be tied together. When we'll be family. We're adopted. We've been invited in, but yet we're still sin covered and we still wander around. And so when I come and I pray, he's drawing me close. Jerry Bridges had an illustration about a kid in a rowboat, and the rope is tied to a tree on the shore. And prayer is like that, Bridges said. He says, I pray and I'm pulling the rope, and I like to think I'm making the island move. But I'm not making it. I'm just cutting close to God. Just the very act of praying is making me. I mentioned this last week. This is a food for thought, and just to bring it up again. I was having a little conflict with somebody. And it wasn't a big deal, but it was really painful to me. And I had tried 2 or 3 times to talk about it and figure it out. I mentioned this last week, I think. I was trying 2 or 3 times to figure it out. And how could I say, maybe if I say this, or maybe if I explain that, or if I told them this thing, and then nothing was seeming to work. And I was at my desk, and I was trying to think about how to somehow make that clear and make it obvious. And just finally in frustration, because I couldn't think of anything else to do, I prayed about it. I'm embarrassed about that. But that was the flow of the thought that went on. And so I said, God, you got to help me. I don't even know what to do about this thing. And I really had, I had just said that. I hadn't even said the next sentence in my prayer, and my phone rang. And it's the other person. It's really powerful when that happens. Very few things make my faith soar as much as that. I'd like to tell you it happens every time I pray, but it doesn't. But I will say it happens enough that I should go to prayer quicker than I do. But even if he hadn't answered that way, there's something about just going to God and admitting, God, I'm just dust and ashes. I can't fix this. And letting God know my heart, and then he lets me know his somehow in ways that I don't totally understand. And he and I are closer at the end of that. And he and I being closer is part of the whole point of this thing. We run away from God in our lives, and yet we're only at home with God. And we're only at peace with God. It's what we were made for. All this concept, it's known as a cosmic redemption. That God one day is going to take this world and take me and you and us, and he's going to bring us once and for all into his presence. And some people, this will be the end of a great story, It's what I wanted my whole life. For others, it's going to be a pretty massive disappointment, because the things that they were chasing, whatever they were, they're going to see at once forever that it wasn't the thing that really totally satisfies. I told you last week, and I think that's kind of an important theme as you go through Romans 8 especially, my deepest desires, the thing I want the most, may not be my strongest desire in the moment. Like, I might want six-pack abs, but I'd really like another piece of cake, right? And that piece of cake desire may get me in the moment, and I won't wait for the other thing that I might want more. What I want most is to be God's, to have Him, to have His peace and His joy and His love and His compassion. That's what I want the most. And my heart, my soul aches for it. It groans for it. I try 1,000 different things. I'm not having very much fun in any of those. It's just not what I was made for. It's not what you were made for. Jesus tells a story, and it's probably his most famous story, about a boy who grows up on a farm, and he just wants out. He's tired of being stuck there. If you grew up on a farm or know much about it, you know that the farm is very much that principle. As soon as I quit applying energy, things start to rust or break or fall apart. And so every day, that's all you do is apply energy to keeping it all running. You've got to till the fields and weed the garden and take care of the animals. They need constant attention. And if you don't pay that constant attention, it'll all start to go a different direction. And this kid decides as he becomes an adult, I don't want this life. This is not at all what I want. And he begins to resent even the good parts about it. He resents his brother who's always working so hard. He resents his dad who's been nothing but good to him. And so one day he goes to his dad and says, you know what, I want a different life. And I'm a young man now with energy, and I don't want to wait for God knows how many years until you're gone. So if you would, I'd like you to calculate up what my inheritance will be and just give me a check for that now. And the father does it. Craziest thing in the world. And a few days later, the son gathers up all he has and he takes off and he goes to a far country and he just plays. Just one steady dose of playing. One party after another. And he's got all this money. And so he has lots of friends who want to help him spend that money. And there's always people who looking to have fun, right? So many of us are fun-starved. And he has no shortage of friends who just want to have fun. And they all do have quite a bit of fun till the money's gone. And then a lot of the friends find somebody else with money, you know. They find they're not having fun with this broke man as much as they were before. And he has to find a job. And he has some experience with animals. So he gets a job feeding pigs. And one day he's looking at what the pigs are eating and how fat they're getting and wonders why they have it better than he does. And he comes to his senses. He says, even my father's worst slave is doing better than this. So he practices his speech. He says to himself, here's what I'll do. I'll go to my dad and I'll say, Father, I've sinned against heaven and against earth. I've certainly sinned against you, and I don't come back to be your son. I'll just be a slave. And that's the plan. And so he starts to walk home. When he tops the hill and he can see the farm there in front of him, it all kind of rushes back. You know, the familiar trees or the familiar outbuildings. He remembers playing in certain areas as a kid. He remembers the peace that he had. And he sees his dad. And Dad, from a distance, sees him. Dad doesn't see him at first when he tops the hill, but Dad sees him as he starts coming down there into the valley, and Dad takes off running towards him. Now, even in our day, it's a weird thing to see a grown man run like a child. You know, like in a big, that's an odd thing. Doesn't happen all the time. There are some men who are just big kids, but it's a rare thing. And the older the person is, the less likely it is to happen. But it was really rare then. It was seen as childish and beneath beneath you. There were no men joggers in ancient Israel. But this guy sees his son at a distance, and he takes off running towards him and embraces him. Big hug there, and he's smelling like pigs, and he's all dirty and broken. And he starts telling Dad the speech, right? I know, Dad, I've sinned against heaven and against earth, and I've certainly sinned against you. And he cuts him off. He says, he yells at the servants behind him, go kill the fattened calf, let's have a big feast, and get this boy some shoes, because only slaves go around barefoot. And get him a ring for his finger, and a new robe, and that ring for the finger would have the family seal on it. It was like a credit card. You put that family seal onto the ink pad, and you could spend out of the family accounts again. And he takes him all the way in. And the son expects for the dad to say, hey, you know what, I'll forgive you, but you got to pay all that off. Or you know what, I'll forgive you, but you're going to work now. And it's like he's adopted right back into the family. The father is so glad that he's there, that he just completely empties everything to bring him back in. Let's have a feast. This son of mine was dead, but now he's alive again. He was lost, but now he's found, which is a weird order. You would think it'd be the other way. You would think dead and alive again is the more serious thing. So lost and found will be first, and then dead and alive. But it doesn't do that. He says he was dead and alive again. He was lost because from God's perspective, from Christ's perspective, to be lost is the very worst thing. It's the very worst thing. You could survive death if you're not lost. But to be lost, to be out there wandering, trying to find your fun, it's not what you were made for. And somewhere in your heart of hearts, you know it. You were made to come home. And the door for that's always open. As we finish up our time today here, I'll have some people in the front who will be praying. And whether you've wandered away from God for a long time, you know, maybe you've never really tried to come close. Or maybe just wandered for a little while, you know. Even what Lance was saying about how we can just not think about God for a week, and then all of a sudden something will hit us, and it'll wake us right back up again. This time is to come back. That's what this time's about. And if any of you need to come back to God, then make sure you pray with the people who are up front. Make sure you sing with some passion, and ask God to come in and take your heart again. You're made for more. Let me pray. Dear Lord God, I thank you for this group. Father, as we come into this place and we all holding different things and all carrying different burdens, all of us trying to figure out how to do it on our own, and life is offered to us. God, sometimes I scramble and I try to plan and figure it all out myself, and you've offered something so much better and so much easier than anything I've tried. It's just my pride that keeps me the other direction. So I pray, God, as we come into this place and this time, if there's anybody here who needs to draw close to you, I pray you help them to drop that pride like an old coat and to walk close to you, God. In Christ's name, amen. Stand up with us.